Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Sangji, welcome to the Sikh Press Association's third event. This is called Does the Media Understand Khalistan? So just a little bit of background before we kick off. The Sikh Press Association is part of Everything's 13, which was a charity founded by the late Dr Singh. And Dr Singh firmly believed that the best way to use Sangat money was to invest in people who serve the Band. And before we get started, we just want to say that this event cost around £900 to put on today. So we would love to keep doing these events, and we would love to keep having your support and your donations so that we can ensure that these events continue. Something that you will all know is that the topic of Khalistan is quite an emotive issue, and please bear that in mind tonight. Please note that this is an event that will discuss the media portrayal of Khalistan and not the issue or the notion of Khalistan itself. This is not a pro or against debate. This is a discussion about the media portrayal of Khalistan. And on that note, any questions or comments that aren't in that remit will not be entertained, for the reason that we can keep the discussion courteous and respectful. And I would like to say that this is a Sangat environment, so this is just a binti to everybody. Please keep the comments and questions just respectful, listen to each other's opinions, and we can debate them in a way that is befitting of Sangat. Just some housekeeping rules. There are no fire drills planned, so if the fire alarm goes off, please make your way at the exit, which was where you came in, around, and then on the court, which is to your left hand side. We have the room until 9 PM, so we hope to finish around 8:45 PM, just to give everybody time to have questions and then to move out. And I think that's it, so I hope you enjoy the event. My name
is Jasmine Singh, and I will be attempting to host tonight's event. So the first thing I will do is introduce our panelists. On my far right, we have Dr Gurnam Singh. He's a presenter for Akaal Channel and also a Sikh social commentator. We have Shamsher Singh here, who's a spokesman for the National Sikh Youth Federation, also an activist and a writer. On my left, we have Jasmine Kaur, also known as Five River Flow, a poet and activist. We have Amardeep Bassey, a journalist, and we have Dr Jasjit Singh, who's recently finished a research project on Sikh radicalisation. Moving forward now with our first question. Given examples of coverage over the last year, are the media fair to Khalistan and Khalistan supporters? Once again, given examples of coverage over the last year, are the media fair to Khalistan and Khalistan supporters? And to begin with our discussion, we're going to start with the media professional on the table, Amardeep Bassey.
Thank you. The question itself asks, is the media fair to Khalistan and the Khalistan supporters? I think I'd like to point out firstly that the word fair itself is very subjective. Your fair might be different from my fair. And ultimately, as a journalist, it is debatable whether it is my role to be fair. It is my role to be balanced and present an accurate report, but is it my duty to be fair? That's up for debate, I would guess. It's certainly not something that's...
Would the two not correspond?
Not necessarily. You can have a balanced debate. One side will say that was unfair, the other side will say it's just such a loaded word. Fair is such a subjective word. Whose fairness are we talking about? Do we mean, is the media fair to Khalistanis for Khalistanis, or is the media fair to the Khalistan movement for the wider population? The actual examples that have been given, I would say, are quite blatantly, I wouldn't say, they don't endorse Khalistan. Now, whether that's unfair is going to be a subjective opinion. But the actual reports that are mentioned there are factual reports. There's no comment in them, there's no opinion in them. That's for the reader to decide. So strictly as a journalistic exercise, this point about being fair is up for debate. It's a case of I need to be accurate, I need to be balanced. Whether I need to be fair, that's for my readers.
So just to further that question then, you mentioned commenting in these articles. In these articles that were given as examples that were emailed to all our registries and all attendees, so I do hope you had a look. There was no comment from anyone that would classify themselves as a supporter of Khalistan. In your opinion, is that something that's fair as a journalist?
No, that is shoddy journalism not to have, you know, if you're writing an article about Khalistan, to not have somebody, you know, who's talking on behalf of the Khalistan, that is just, you know, bad journalism. And it's, you know, examples of journalism like that are going to bring about accusations of bias and pressure from governments. So that's a journalistic fault, and it would be correct to say that is unfair not to have the opinion of the subject matter that you're talking about.
Pushing this question now on to Shamsher Singh. So in your opinion, are the media fair to Khalistan and Khalistan supporters? But also answering what Amardeep Bassey just said, what would fairness actually look like in your opinion as somebody who's very openly pro-Khalistani? There's a web series that Shamsher Singh led, which is called The Origins of Khalistan, which over 70,000 people have viewed. So again, in your opinion, what would fairness look like, and are the media fair to Khalistan and Khalistan supporters?
I'd say unequivocally no, the media is not fair to Khalistan. And I'd say beyond that, the media doesn't acknowledge the violence that took place, the epistemic violence, the violence of translation. Like Sikhism is accepted as our religion. How we went from Sikhi to Sikhism, the violence of colonialism, modernity, coloniality. The media shows no awareness of this or analysis of this, yet claims to use ciphers to contort representation, such as being balanced and showing accuracy versus fairness, and making fairness into a subjective experience. When we're talking about the lived realities of the Qawm, of Qawmi Sangharsh, of the realities of people of Punjab who in the hundreds of thousands have voluntarily courted arrest, who turned out in 1986 for the Sarbat Khalsa. So to say whether it's fair, Khalistanis would say the fairness is to the Sikh Panth, and the unfairness that's shown is representing narratives that have began and been perpetuated by the Indian government, and those narratives have been latched onto us and enforced through state violence and terror. I'll give you an example of that very specifically. Every year in June 1984, many of you would read articles about Khalistan, and there's a particular phraseology that's repeated, that has been repeated for the last 25 years. That is that the militants, this operation happened to flush out militants, extremists / terrorists / radicals from the Golden Temple. That was originally reported by the Globe and Mail in June 8th, 1984, and since then has been repeated without any challenge in all mainstream media. And books have picked it up. General Barr, that's where the source came from. He talked about the operations to flush out terrorists. So the media has no fairness, has no understanding of Khalistan at all, or the lived experience, has no understanding of Sikhi or how it's interconnected. In fact, that's one of the biggest areas of fascination for the media, and they're always trying to pry into our community. How is Sikhi and Khalistan connected? Why are Sikhs wearing the stars more? Why are Sikhs going to the Gurdwara more? Is this connected to religious radicalization? Is that then connected to Khalistan? Are Sikhs going to now become terrorists? So the understanding that they show is very limited, completely unfair, completely biased, and we'd say as Khalistanis pro the Indian government's narratives.
I just want to relate one point in relation to what Shamsher Singh just said. The Sikh Press Association, prior to this event, we sent out a questionnaire to approximately 200 different email accounts of media individuals or media organizations. We did only get a very small sample back of media professionals that did fill out that questionnaire, but we still have some telling statistics. And one of the points Shamsher said first was there's no understanding, or the narrative does not include any mention of the Sikh genocide. And in our questionnaire, only 46% of those that filled out our questionnaire said that it's important to relate Khalistan to the Sikh genocide of 1984 and the fake encounters of Punjab police which happened thereafter. So again, only 46% of media professionals felt it was important to relate the Khalistan movement to the Sikh genocide and situations thereafter. Bringing it to you now, Dr Gurnam Singh, do you feel that there's a lack of fairness in the way media report on Khalistan? And as somebody yourself that presents on live TV, on TV in general, is this something that you have to kind of weave your way around?
I think there is. I agree with a lot of what Shamsher said in his analysis, but I would add to that. I would say that, why is there fairness? What's the reason behind that? And I think that just to see it as a conspiracy theory, I think is too simplistic. I would say that the media, many things, but broadly speaking, if you're looking at the print media and to some extent the television media, and particularly in India, but internationally, there's two kinds of positions that you get. You get pro-Indian government, media, and everybody knows that in India, much of the media is bought off. So you get that, and they're probably paid to put that line there. Probably happens in other countries as well. If you think about the Daily Mail and things. But there's also what you find: a lot of people who work in the media are liberals, maybe like me. I don't know, who kind of try to engage in reasonable and rational debate. And I think that one of the problems is I don't think that those people who are advocating Khalistan have made a strong enough argument for Khalistan. And that's not an argument against, but it's actually saying that it's such an important struggle that we need to make stronger arguments. And working in the media, where I do bring pro-Khalistanis onto sometimes I'm scared to ask them difficult questions. Not because, that I'm against Khalistan, but I feel that they might do a disservice to Khalistan. I'll give you a good example of that. Misrepresentation. I had Simranjit Singh a few months ago. I interviewed him. He's seen as a leading figure of the Khalistan movement. And I said, what is your reasoning for Khalistan? And he said, well, the Hindus have got Hindustan, the Pakistanis have got Khalistan, so we can have, Pakistanis have got Pakistan, so we can have Khalistan. So I said, do you then say that the Hindutva is legitimate? Because that's what his argument was. And then he kind of went for me and said, so I think we haven't made the arguments, which is then left as, I think, vulnerable to some of those critiques. Having said that, clearly, all the odds are stacked against us, and nobody can deny that. There are also other big issues around the kind of imperial legacy. Mark Tully, who's reported on the 1984, talked about Bhindranwala as this kind of, almost a kind of Bin Laden type of character. So even that kind of colonial construct is still there. So, we are fighting on all corners, but we haven't really put our case across in the way that we should have.
So I'd just like to forward a point that you touched on. Firstly, actually, so we were actually in contact with Mark Tully about being involved in this event, and unfortunately he wasn't able to. But just touching on the point that you mentioned and bringing it to you, Jasmine Banji, in regards to being given that opportunity to discuss Khalistan in the media and public affairs, we just provided an example of coverage previously. We didn't give any opportunity to Khalistanis to have their say on articles which reference Khalistan. So there was no pro-voice in any of these news reports that we sent out. Do you feel there's a lack of opportunities out there for people to speak about their position of Khalistan?
Personally, I feel that there is a lack of opportunity for people to speak about their views regarding Khalistan, because they either feel like they're going to be either misrepresented straight away, because when you say the word Khalistan to a lot of people within the Sikh community itself, it has negative connotations of extremism, terrorism. Santji is painted as Dr Gurnam said, as like some Bin Laden Taliban type figure, when he was the exact opposite. And I think spaces like this are extremely important to discuss Khalistan and the way the media portrays it. But relating back to the question as a whole, I think Khalistanis aren't given the opportunities that, say, other groups are given simply because of the type of stereotypical image that exists for them already.
Dr Jasjit Singh, when you were doing your research on Sikh radicalisation, what was your opinion when you were reading up on a lot of the media portrayals which you might have seen in that reference Khalistan? Did you feel that they were fair or sometimes balanced?
So it kind of goes into the second question in a bit, because in terms of reporting on Khalistan, outside the BBC Asian network, the most frequent paper that reports Khalistan is the Daily Mail, surprisingly. Or talks about stories about Khalistan, and much of this appeared to be basically a copy of reports that had been published in Indian media. So it kind of goes into the second question a little bit. Yeah, which I'll probably best answering in a second.
Yeah, we will do. So we'll open it up to the audience if anyone would like to comment. So again, the question is, given examples of coverage over the last year, and if you did register online, you would have been given 3 examples from India, Canada and the UK. Are the media fair to Khalistan and Khalistan supporters? Would anyone from the audience like to comment on this?
I got a question. Yeah, I got a question.
Just give a second to the mic, please.
I got a
Sorry, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, my name is Amardeep Bassey, and my question really is about the comments that Jasjit Singh recently made. You were saying that he's the one in India, particularly fronting Khalistan, about the rape example that he gave, which was taken out of context, I felt, and that does nothing for the Khalistan movement in any way. If that's the sort of person that we've got, leading from the front.
Well, that's a prime example of what I'm saying. A lot of people sent it to me saying, you need to do a program on this, you need to... I've stopped, I'm not going to do it, not because, I'm not horrified by this, but I'm so horrified by this that this could damage our cause infinitely. And, I'm sure that the pro-Indian media will pick this up. So I think that's part of the problem, is maybe things get lost in translation. Maybe that's what it's about. Maybe there's a different mindset. It's okay to speak to our own audience, but then when you start to use the same narratives to speak to a wider audience, you actually lose the kind of argument rather than win the argument. So I think that's a perfect example.
I'd just like to add to that as well. I think it's quite unfair to the Khalistan Sangharsh, to the liberation movement of an entire people, to basically interpret it through the words and actions of one individual such as Jasjit Singh. I think that kind of does a bit of an injustice to the complexity of the conversation and how it affects the entire Sikh diaspora and the Sikh population that exists in Indian occupied East Punjab and West Punjab.
Yeah, I'd also like to add on to that. As with any political liberation movement, particularly our one, we're faced with so many different obstacles and so many different forces against us and attacking us, and to just pigeonhole it and to use Jasjit Singh and his comments and to just focus solely on that I think it's frankly an insult to all the hard work and legacies and everything else that is currently going on. So I'm not trying to say brush it under the carpet, but what I'm saying is don't just focus on that one negative thing.
The problem with that is if someone like Jasjit Singh, who seems to be a bit of a poster boy figure for the Khalistan movement, if he's the one who's getting the sound bites out there, he's the one that's being interviewed, if he's the one that the Khalistan movement is putting forward as, listen to this man, and he comes out with the nonsense that he did the other day, the offensive nonsense, and then to laugh about it on camera, how do you expect anybody to take Khalistan or anything to do with Khalistan, certainly in the media, seriously? I mean, that man, I don't know him from Adam, that's the only soundbite, to be honest with you, I've ever heard, but if that's my introduction to the Khalistan movement, then it's not a very good introduction.
So with a brief understanding of the media world, there wouldn't really be much incentive for a journalist to seek more from anyone else, right? Because he is presented as the figurehead, so therefore you'll take his soundbite and there's your news story, right? So is there more work to be done then from people that are pro-Khalistan to kind of...
From what I can see, very little work has been done. It needs to start from scratch. There needs to be a strategy. It needs to be a long-term strategy. You can't, it's talked about as a media war. When there's a war, you have a strategy, you have tactics. You don't just turn your back on the enemy and say, well, forget him, we don't understand what he's on about, he doesn't understand us. The media is not your enemy. It's, in this propaganda war that you talk about, you're up against the Indian machine. That is, very difficult to counteract. And you're not going to counteract it with a disjointed, unthought out plan where one person, one movement is saying one thing, another is saying the other. There's no consistency, there's no thought out plan. It's all been seemingly from, sat on the media side, it seems to be very much hand to mouth, completely reactive, and no strategy. There is no end game to this.
So sitting on the Khalistan side, it's actually really clear to us that there are other voices that exist within the community. If you go online, look at Sikh Siyasat, look at the lectures that they do on Samvad, the way they kind of tackle this, and this is Punjab based, it's indigenous, it's in Punjabi, the Punjabi is incredibly complex, it's difficult to understand, but the basis of the conversation is the impact of colonization, of modernity on us as individuals, on our conversation, on our framing of our understanding of self, our relationship with Gurmat, with Guru, and how we navigate modernity. So there are alternative voices, but this is where we've got to question, what is the media's role? Is it to sensationalize, or is it actually to do the research and actually go into the community and find out what the alternative voices are? But that's when we get into, well, it's too complicated, and it's not the media's role to explain the Khalistan movement. But this is where it comes into the question of myself as an activist. Well, how genuine is the media in actually trying to find out? Because as a Sikh activist, there's a plethora of voices, of positions. I've learned everything from somewhere, right? I didn't just pluck it out of the sky, out of my imagination. So I'm influenced by academics, by thinkers, by writers like Jasmine Singh, that's written quite a number of books on Sikh Sangharsh in Punjabi. So there are things out there. It's just that the media either doesn't want to find them or doesn't know how to find them.
I just want to bring up a stat which might add to both points. 93% of the media professionals that took part in our questionnaire said they were not aware of movements in the 80s which led to the Khalistan movement. So that's 93% said they were not aware of things that happened in the 80s which led to the Khalistan movement. Not to kind of just pin it on yourself, but the first question is literally about the media coverage. Amardeep, do you think, though, on the other side, there's more for the media to do in terms of doing their own investigations, or is it a case of this is a job for them, they've got deadlines to meet, they can't be expected to do all of that legwork?
There's a bit of both. I mean, journalists are professional people who write stories, and you talk about sensation, right? Just like anybody else selling a product, it's got to be written in a way that's going to engage the reader. So, I mean, there's the world of journalism and the way journalism operates and how journalists operate is very much a closed world. Very few people know how news is accumulated, how it's gathered, and it's more a case of what has the journalist left out rather than what is in his story. You should always ask yourself, what isn't in this story and why isn't it there? But this whole attitude of them and us against the media, it's not good for anybody. And ultimately, there is the old saying of, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. If the media is your enemy or seen as a hostile institution, then bring it closer, make it a friend, and that way you can shape the agenda. And yes, your average white Western middle-class journalist working for one of the broadsheets or even the tabloids, he wants a quick fix. He wants to be able to say in 10 points, this is Khalistan, black and white, here's the 4 points, here's the pro-Khalistan, here's the anti-Khalistan voices. That's a start. You can have more nuanced and deeper conversations later, but you've got to have a start somewhere. I mean, without getting ahead of myself, this whole Jagtar Johal situation at the moment, absolutely pristine moment for the Khalistan movement to get some kind of traction in the media, worldwide traction, and I think it's an opportunity being missed because there's so much hostility to the media.
But is that opportunity even available if media don't know which kind of routes to go down to?
Again, it's for the Sikh nation and those representing the Sikh nation. I mean, the Sikhs have been in this country or in the West for tens of years. There should, I would have thought by now, be an established media channel, some kind of gatekeeper. Because at the moment we've got so many competing voices. We've got one faction saying one thing. There is no unitary body that you could say they speak for the Sikh nation. And to use the word Khalistan and Sikh community interchangeably, I think that's unfair as well.
Can I just
yes, please.
Draw both of the previous comments into one? I think Shamsher's arguments are really interesting and nuanced. They're kind of arguments from a philosophical angle, and they're arguments that in university lecture theatres we can certainly have and debate, but in the kind of media there's not a lot of traction for that kind of stuff. Not because it's not important, but because particularly if you go to like 5 Live or Asian Network, they want extreme arguments. They want position people who give you a soundbite, and that's why they never asked me to appear on that, because I'll give a nuanced argument, and they don't like that because they lose audience. So that's the problem with the radio. The TV also, to some extent, the Sikh media has a kind of its own bias, and they only have people there who will put their, and it's often associated with Jathebandis. So we are really kind of all the platforms are a bit kind of challenging for us at the moment. But I think what we do need to do is ultimately the case for Khalistan will be made through nuanced arguments, through reasoned arguments, through evidence arguments. And so in a sense, this work is really important. We've got to find ways of bringing that work forward. And I'm trying to do that. One of my problems is that when we bring two people who bring an intellectual argument, is that they end up fighting, or some people can end up accusing them of being against a cause. And I think that's the other problem, that we haven't, in a sense, developed our own tolerance, I think. How do we develop a common position through kind of debating and arguing? At the moment,
let's try and stay on the topic of fairness, because we're going to come to that in a moment. For the audience, if anyone does have any comments or questions at any point, please just raise your hand.
My name is Dr Gurnam Singh, and I think that the panel is telling Khalistan, talking about Khalistan in a very binary way. It's there's this Sikh country that we're going to have for ourselves, or we're not, and that doesn't seem very achievable in the medium to long term. But for me, Khalistan is also a mindset. It's a movement, and I think that's what's getting ignored, and that's what directly to Amardeep actually is not getting reported fairly. So Khalistan for me is the mindset that actually the Punjab police are not going to be able to pick up someone from this country like Jaggi and hold him without charge. It's that a politician like Jagdish Tatla is not going to be able to sit and be recorded and talk about killing hundreds of Sardars. It's it's a viewpoint that the government of Punjab are not going to be able to continue to strangle the state and have anti-Sikh politics, and is that getting reported fairly? Because if it is, I'm not seeing it.
I agree with in that Khalistan does not necessarily have to mean a nation state. There are stateless nations around. There are a lot of stateless nations around. A group of people who call themselves a nation, but they don't have a state. So I agree with you in that respect that Khalistan has different aspects to it. It's not just about the land. There is a mindset, the Khalsa mindset, the Sikh mindset, and some might say that would translate as Sikhi being a universe, not just restricted to a little part of Punjab, but the universe. To get really philosophical about it.
We'll have from.
But like I said, these are more nuanced and more.
No, but you spoke about this Jaggi thing about opportunity. Is it not the media's duty to report the facts?
It's not the media's duty to do anything.
And then the media's ultimately
the media isn't a tool for people to shape and use. The media it is there to be. It is the job of the Khalistan movement to educate and inform the media. It is not necessarily the media's job to court the Khalistan.
So we've got 4 more questions to go through. So we'll do 2 more comments from the audience, and then we'll go to the next question.
I think I just want to touch on the point, especially if you see in the media. I'll agree that there's a big bias. If they look at media, they're very chalak and they know what the Khalistan movement is, but they present it very biasly. I'll just share an example with you. I shared there was a photo going on over Twitter. I'll mention the name of the journalist from Hindustan Time. His name is Ravinder Vasudeva. Yeah, so please.
I think he's a senior editor, if I remember correctly.
So it's very interesting the way he labeled. I will tell you the headline. So there was Daily Tarka from Daily Mail in India, and the other one was Hindustan Times. So the Daily Mail goes, Punjabi Tarka, gun culture fuels, illegal arms trade. And the same news was reported by Hindustan Times journalist, and he said, new brand of Sikh militancy, tech-savvy, pro-Khalistan youth radicalized on social media. So I think it's just as Sikhs, as a young Sikh, I think they're buying into the narrative of the West. Oh, the people are getting radicalized on social media. But as Shamsher said before, and Apaji, I just want to say, like, Khalistan, it's a proper movement. It was declared by Sabbat Khalsa, by Khalsa. So we shouldn't have we shouldn't say only one person can represent that views or etc. So I believe there's a big bias myth and people need to get exactly like up to the standards.
Hi. So I just want to make comments about the earlier part of your speech. You said that the Khalistan's strategy to sell itself basically to the international media and international audiences, I mean, they have to reform it. Well, I'm not really knowledgeable on the issue, but I can draw lines to another cause which face the same problems, and it's up against a vast itinerary of media. That's the Kurdish cause. But they've actually, I mean, they've done a brilliant job of, you know, fighting off the Turkish, the Arab, and the Iranian media itinerary. I usually go to the parliaments and I see the events being covered by the media. And as far as, I mean, is there something that the Khalistan movement can learn from the Kurdish movement? Because it's been such a successful movement. And I mean, as far as the media is concerned, at the end of the day, these are private corporations. They want to show us what attracts more international audience. And I've rarely seen media covering tensions. They cover it when they boil up to their flashpoints. Yeah?
Thank you. We'll move on to the next question now.